Right, so we need to get to the bottom of this once and for all. Right here on the table, I have 6 of the top flagship smartphones of 2022. I have the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, iPhone 13 Pro Max, OnePlus 10 Pro, Huawei P50 Pro, Google Pixel 6 Pro, and the Realme GT2 Pro. A lot of pros. I need your help. Recently, I took a trip to a sun-filled destination in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And while I was there, I thought, you know what, this place is pretty beautiful, and it would make a wonderful backdrop for a ultimate camera comparison test. But with a twist. The comparison test would be between all of the frontrunners in this space and a couple of flagship killers that claim to offer what the big boys or girls have for less. Many argue that the iPhone 13 Pro Max here has the best all-round camera and video on the market, but I wanted to do a little social experiment to see whether that is perceived quality based on a mind bias because you know it's made by Apple, a company I know many of you are fond of, or whether the images and videos are indeed better. And this is where those of you out there that are Android fans, I need you to prove them wrong, because people will often argue till they're blue in the face that one is better than the other, simply based on the fact that they know what brand it is. So over the next few minutes, I will have side-by-side comparisons, images and videos from each of the 6 competitors, labelled A to F, and I want you to take part in a blind challenge, whereby you view said images and videos without knowing which device took what, and I want you to tell me, number 1, which of the 6 A to F you prefer. I like B and D, for example, and if you can, which devices took those images. So A is the Realme GT2 Pro, for example. You can also split this between photo and video. I like the photos on D, I like the videos on B. Just try and provide a little bit of information, so hopefully it can help us all in this experiment. I will be breaking down the images and videos into the lenses that took them as well, primary, ultra-wide, zoom, etc., and individual modes like night mode. I will be sharing my observations as we go through, but ultimately I want a lot of the critique to come from you, because I'm trying to prove or disprove your original thoughts on brands and their performance. Hopefully you find this video helpful, and if you do, it would be absolutely wonderful to drop a like on the video. It took quite a long time to create, and thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Now please note, for fairness and to try and not give away the identities of the devices, everything has been shot in default auto modes. And obviously to run these tests I had to rig the 6 phones up like this, so angles and heights will slightly differ obviously between them, but try and pay closer attention to the core qualities like stabilization, HDR, color temperature, etc. I've also split the images A to C and then D to F, as fitting 6 photos on the screen at one time wouldn't leave you with big enough images to really judge them apart. Not ideal, I know, having 3 and then another 3, but you can scrub back and forward between them to kind of get that comparison. Hopefully better than having tiny 6 images and videos, especially if you're viewing on a phone. So first up we have your traditional standard photos taken from the phone's primary lenses, and in this first one you can see straight away that A is darker than B and C is slightly more saturated, the water is more blue and vibrant, but which do you prefer? D to F is a closer affair, but D seems to have slightly brighter highlights. A again seems darker here, and the HDR, the high dynamic range, seems slightly better on the other two. A is probably more true to life in terms of colour temperature, but there seems to be slightly less detail in the shadows, and B and C are probably more pleasing on the eye for social media, for example. Again, D to F are closer in terms of HDR and colour temperature. In this picture, B and C again seem slightly more vibrant and rich in the colours, if slightly oversaturated compared to the other 4. Although again, for social media, some of you might prefer those styles of photos, ones that really pop with vibrancy, although some of you may prefer for it to be more realistic. Similarly, this picture seems to show great details in A, and some of them seem a little washed by comparison. I do like F on this occasion, really vibrant blue, while still appearing nice and realistic. And the last standard photos for now, more in a second, we have the beautiful golden hour. I mean, take me back to this view now, please. A and B are still continuing to be slightly more realistic in the colours, and A again seems to struggle slightly with the details in the shadows, but more accurate and less artificial looking for the time of day, with great details in the skies that are slightly blown out in B, and C's vibrancy looking lovely jubbly for social media, but possibly slightly warmer and oversaturated. D absolutely nails the exposure around the sun, but seems to struggle slightly with soft focus in the water, whereas F seems to slightly overexpose the sun, but also has darker shadows, which is interesting. E seems to do a pretty decent job with both. Its image really pops, but it's not as oversaturated as C as well. Good job here. Now, speaking of lovely jubbly social media, that's where you may have heard of today's video sponsor, Skillshare. And before we jump into some video comparisons and some more photos, of course, as well, I wanted to share a little bit more information on them and what they offer. If the last couple of years have taught us anything, it's that finding a way to be more in control of our own destiny and gathering the skills ourselves to be more efficient and take life by the horns is imperative in this uncertain world. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring and creative classes for those who want to learn new skills. It's absolutely ideal for personal growth. You select your interests and Skillshare then recommends classes for you. As an example, I obviously create tech content online, and while scrolling Skillshare, I noticed a class from Marquez Brownlee, or MKBHD as he's also known, on YouTube success. Now, even though I'm not new to the YouTube platform, I still found his insights hugely helpful. And if you're thinking of starting a new channel, it might be gold dust for you. If you do have a specific skill in mind that you might want to learn about, they might just have the classes for you on here. And the link in the video description below and in the pinned comment is definitely worth checking. The first 1,000 people to use the code ASBYT0522 will get a 1-month free trial, so definitely worth taking a look. And who knows, learning a new skill might dramatically change your life's course. So jumping straight back to the comparison, we now have some video shots using the front-facing camera. Here I want you to pay attention to exposure, as some are really nice and consistent while others jump in and out, sometimes underexposing and then completely becoming blown out as the camera turns in varied lighting. And I also want you to be aware of the different max resolution capabilities of these devices. You may spot that, and things like natural bokeh or background blur and how wide the actual angle is. Like B here, that is much wider, has less background blur for a less cinematic kind of look. But it's probably the most natural true to life in terms of colour temperature. A again has me really dark in the scene, as it still seems to struggle with dynamic range, and there is a noticeable lens flare also. I think my personal favourite in this section is probably D. Realistic colours, nice natural background blur, and great details, something that E in particular is struggling with. Here is an example in low light, and the stabilisation seems better on A and B, but I like the brightness in the scene in C, which is similar to F, although F seems to struggle with a dropout in picture quality, with an almost jittery focus at times. Now we flip to the rear, and again, really pay close attention to stabilisation, how smooth or shaky the footage is, as some of them are really impressive and almost gimbal level, others not so much. And also I'm really testing the exposure here, going from really bright to much darker areas. Which do you think handles these best, and which colour temperatures do you personally prefer? Do you prefer the rich, greeny blues of the ocean, or ones that are slightly darker and possibly more realistic, but maybe you could say a bit bland? Moving on, we're jumping back to photos and the front-facing cameras, and all phones are shooting in their own versions of a portrait mode. B seems to have much less bokeh, or background blur, and also has a wider angle, whereas C and E appear to have a much warmer, almost orangey tint compared to the likes of F, which are cooler. And for reference, the t-shirt that I'm wearing here is a deep black, not a faded sort of almost grey black. So that may help you with colour accuracy. Next up we have some ultra-wide angle shots, and sometimes you do get with phones a colour discrepancy when you're jumping in between the different lenses. Many people see that as a slight negative, it's a bit inconsistent, so see if that is the case for any of these. C, for example, seems cooler than some of its other lenses, with A still producing the darkest of all 6 images. B and D are taking care of that HDR business here nicely with a slight flare on E. Real warmer tones on A here, with C significantly cooler than its own primary lens, with F probably looking the least distorted. Now we're getting a little bit closer to our subject. We're going to check out a bit of juicy zoom action. And importantly, I want you to pay close attention to the text in the images. Which ones look the sharpest? Note, some of these phones are using more of an optical zoom, some of them are using more of a digital zoom, and that will affect the quality of the image. Optical zoom kind of gives you that lossless quality. So a 2x optical zoom shot, for example, should look pretty much the same as if you were stood taking a standard shot twice as close. A 2x digital zoom, you would lose some quality. Obviously, some of these phones have a larger zoom count. Some can go to 100x, for example, including optical and digital together. But in this context, I've used 5x zoom across the board because I think that's a nice level of max zoom that the everyday person would probably use more often. Not many people would use the massive long zooms, and also by using massive long zoom shots, you would automatically know which ones are what in terms of devices, because some of them simply couldn't go that far. So I didn't want to give too much away as well. Wanted to keep things a little bit under wraps. Yeah. Whatever that. What am I doing? Yeah. A and E here seem to be struggling the most with the crispness of the text in these examples, with B, D and F much of a muchness, and it's only really the colour temperature that differentiates them. Low light is up next, a very big feature for a lot of phone manufacturers. They tend to focus quite heavily on night mode and low light performance, but this is very subjective, so again, share as much information as you can. Some absolutely love the fact that you can see all those juicy details in the shadowy areas of a photo in low light, whilst others think that sometimes they appear a bit bright, almost like daylight, and almost defeating the object of taking night photography. The difference between A and B here is a perfect example. D is probably the best of both worlds here. The difference in colours as we switch lenses is again present, and I'm not sure what's happened with B here, with this almost Northern Lights green tint going on. D and F again very strong here and pretty true to life. And then we have the zoom shots to consider. Which ones are you choosing here? One more selfie for you now. With A having warmer tones, B darker with next to no background blur, with F probably providing the best edge detection and sharpest image. Hopefully you've got an idea now in your head which these phones are and which ones you prefer. But if you're still not sure, roll the clip. I've got a couple more photos for you, just to kind of cement that decision. Which phone, A to F, are you going for, and which of the 6 phones took which images? Hopefully you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. I really enjoyed making it, I'm not gonna lie. If you did, drop a like on the video. Make sure you stay tuned for the finale, the results video / announcement on Twitter and Instagram. If you are in the market for one of these phones, it may help you if camera is a big thing for you. I love you and leave you. I'll see you in the next one. ASBYT, peace out.